Good, well, morning, afternoon, team. So, kind of lied. So, this is going to be two parts, as I think it's going to be very, very, very long if I do it in one part, shall we say. So, first part I'm going to do now, you can all obviously have a watch over. This is just a bit more of a deeper understanding of the thyroid. And then the next part will be in terms of management, making sure we've got healthy thyroid, what we do to test the thyroid, what we can do outside of blood work to kind of make sure that we are having and we do have a healthy metabolism, shall we say, to help with us achieving our fitness goals. So I'm going to try my very, very best to keep this short. Yeah, this is part one. Part two I will probably do on Tuesday or Thursday next week, to be honest. I'm not going to rush to get the rest of this finished, as I've literally had my head buried in the sand for the last, hour and a bit. So, yeah, that is that. I've actually missed a meal because of it. So I'm definitely getting smaller than I already am. And before anyone says, these are blue light blocking glasses. I don't actually need glasses. I do have 20/20 vision. But since being ill, I have had headaches, so I'm just going to wear this to just block out all the haters as well. But yeah, I will get straight into this because otherwise I will waffle. So, firstly, what is the thyroid? And it is basically a gland. It sits literally, the voice box is here. It sits literally here, just underneath the voice box. So the voice box here sits about here, and then it sits just in front of the trachea on the windpipe. And it is basically just the gland where the thyroid hormone, or the metabolism, we could call it, I guess we can call it, the metabolism is, I say it in quotation because it's not really the metabolism, but where metabolism hormones are produced, or some of them are produced, not all of, but some of them are produced. And this is kind of dictated by a pretty complex, I guess, feedback loop, we can call it, when it comes to having sufficient levels, stopping that off, and then kind of our body is constantly regulating that. So throughout the day, we're going to have points of higher, we're going to have points of lower. And obviously in part two, I will go through all of that stuff a little bit more. But I basically just want to give you guys a little bit more of an overview of kind of how the thyroid does work, I guess. That is kind of part one. That fucking extra, what are you doing there, mate? That was really pissing me off. Sorry, guys. Anyway, yeah, so that is that. How is it produced? So, this is the feedback loop I was talking about. So, in our body, in our tissues, so T4 doesn't really go into tissues too much, but T3 does, well, it does go into tissues, I lie. But T3 and T4 go into tissues. T4 is not really the active form of thyroid, so it doesn't really actually do anything in the body as such. T3 is what regulates the metabolism. And what we basically get is we get a feedback loop from the T3, the T4, up to the hypothalamus. I think that's in the brain. And that then signals TRH, which is thyrotropin releasing hormone, which then signals, based on the amount of hormones that is in the body and is within tissues, how much TSH needs to be produced. Obviously, if we're in a position where we've got perfect thyroid hormones, and the levels are where they need to be, TSH will be low, or TRH will be low, which means TSH as a byproduct is then low, which then means the feedback loop back to the thyroid gland is then obviously, well, there's not loads of thyroid stimulating hormone being pumped to the thyroid gland. In periods where, thyroid tissue or thyroid hormone in tissues is low, that feedback loop again repeats itself. TRH will obviously be at a greater number. TSH will then be at a greater number as well, which then means that more of the stimulating hormone is sent to the thyroid gland, where more thyroid hormone is, hopefully, if the thyroid does work properly, is then pumped out. So, yeah, that is that. That's kind of, I don't want to go into kind of too much detail with this stuff because it is very confusing if I do. So I'm going to try and break it down into as simple English as possible so you can actually understand it. Obviously, some things aren't English and can't be broken down into simple English, but when they can and where they can, I will try and break it down into as simple form as possible. So that is that. Why is it not doing next slide? Yeah, so next slide. So what is TSH? So like I said, TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. It's released from the pituitary in response to TRH, which is in the hypothalamus. And it then binds, let me just move this. It then binds to the receptors on the thyroid follicular cells. That is basically in the thyroid, triggering a signaling cascade of 1, an increase in iodine uptake, and 2, the synthesis of thyroglobulin, which then in turn creates T3 and T4. That is pretty much it. Yeah, it's pretty simple. So as you can kind of see here as well, I know there's quite a few of you on the team that do have hypothyroidism or medicated or have been hyperthyroid and then are now hypothyroid. But as you can see here, the NHS are missing the fucking mark with this shit. Because anyone that gets a NHS blood test done, you will see just 2 hormones tested. T4, which I just said was not an active hormone of the thyroid, and TSH, which again doesn't really give us the full picture. If we actually want the full picture, I actually don't even think anyone in the UK even does this, but if we want a full picture of metabolic health, what we need to see is TSH, T3, T4, reverse T3, and then we also need to look at the thyroid antibodies. So we got TPOAB and then TSI. Kind of like the main ones. There is another one, but I can't actually remember the name of it. It's on here, but I can't remember the name of it. I'm not even going to try and say the name because it's complex. But yeah, if we look at like let me pause this 1 second. But yeah, like if we look, for example, this is a client. I'm sure they won't mind me showing. But that is the results of their test. What we've got here tested: TSH and T4. No T3, no reverse T3, no thyroid antibodies. So we can really see how when the NHS actually do prescribe stuff, they're actually doing it with only having half the photo, with half the picture, half the picture. It would almost be like a car mechanic, and you having, say, a fault with your engine, lifting just the bonnet up and going, it's that part of the engine, without even looking in the engine and saying that's what it is. They're basically just stabbing in the dark and kind of hoping for the best, which is why a lot of people do actually get not necessarily misdiagnosed, but they do get mismedicated when it does come to actually having that stuff and needing that stuff. And there's some simple fixes which we'll obviously go into in part 2, where we could actually just improve lifestyle factors, and we probably will see that we don't actually need T4 in solitude. I'll be completely transparent, as we all know. I'm very transparent with things, but when I was bodybuilding, I have used T3, I have used T4, as it's obviously a way in which we can control the metabolism, and it's also a way in which it can kind of speed it up, to speed things up, to I guess get leaner quicker, which it don't do what I do. Obviously with the presence of anabolic steroids as well, we can also reduce the amount of breakdown of muscle that we do get, as T3 and T4 then, or T3 is not tissue selective, so it will help metabolize more fat, but it will also metabolize more muscle as a result as well. But the thyroid is one of the glands and one of the things that is the most resilient, I guess we could call it, in the sense of it will bounce back very, very quickly. So I didn't get bloods done because I'm very fucking stupid. But if I had got bloods done, it probably would have been 3 to 4 weeks before my bloods with thyroid hormones in to with them out, I then got back to normal, simply due to just improving diet, increasing calorie intake, and just getting the body back to being a less stressed and healthier spot. And to be honest, a lot of people's thyroid issues do just come from, unfortunately, unless we have Hashimoto's, where it's unfortunately an autoimmune attack, it does just come from poor lifestyle choices. So if you do take it, please don't take offense, but there probably is a way that we could get you off it if you really wanted to. I won't say any more on that piece. Not saying everyone, but there is some people in here that I'm pretty confident, if we really tried and we really looked to improve our lifestyle, our way of living, that we could get you off, or at least on a reduced dose of thyroid, and eventually off of it. So The two hormones, obviously, I've mentioned both of them already, or the two major hormones, T3, T4. So T3 is the active hormone. Only 20% of T3 is actually produced in the thyroid gland. The other 80% of it is converted from T4 into T3 into kind of like then what we have as the active form. So another example, I know he won't mind me sharing. Elliot got his bloods done last week, and his T4 was at 12, which is right at the bottom end of the range of his of where T4 would be in terms of the medical range. Fucking hell. However, his T3 was at, I believe it was 4.6, which is actually about 3/4 of the way up the graph. I cannot speak today, can I? Up the graph of where we'd want it to be. So if I show you, so the lower range of T4 is 12. You're not going to be able to see that, are you? No. Well, anyway, the lower range of T4 is 12. The upper range of, let me just read the range. T3 range 3.1 to 6.8. So for me, I want people's T3 to be anywhere over 3.5. And I think we're pretty good. If we're right at the bottom, okay, probably not great, but he is pretty much bang in the middle. His T4, however, the range is 12 to 22. His was at 12. So if we just looked at his T4, like the NHS would have done, they wouldn't have said he was hypothyroid just yet, but they would have said, you're very close to being hypothyroid. And they probably would have given him some levothyroxine, to be honest, based on that number. However, given that he's got a decent number of T4, which is the active hormone, he doesn't need it. And then again, TSH, again, I like that between 1 and 2, which I'll cover in the later part of part 2. But yeah, his was at 2.7. So again, not awful, not the best, but we have put some things in place to correct that as well. So I'll report back on that in about 6 weeks once we have got some extra bloods done on that. But again, like we can see, literally the only difference between T4 and T3 is one iodine atom. So we have this enzyme called I'm going to absolutely butcher this, deiodinized enzyme. I believe that is what it's called. Where is it? I've actually written it down somewhere. Where is it? I'm just going to read I haven't written it down. Oh, I didn't write it down. Deiodinized is what it is anyway. And that basically just clatters away at the additional iodine, gets rid of it, and then we then get T4 to T3. Boom, it's now done. It can now actually be used. So yeah, that is that. Reverse T3. Again, oh, there it is. Deiodinized enzyme. There we go. So, reverse T3. So this is another way in which our body does what our body does to manage not having too much T3 in the body. So all it does, it basically gets the feedback loop, again, same as what we get from the hypothalamus, but obviously within tissues. And all that happens, if I show you it here, is the deiodinized, I'm not even going to, that enzyme basically gets rid of the iodine atom, which is the purple, in a different spot. And that then makes it from an active thyroid hormone to an inactive thyroid hormone. And this is basically done when we need to conserve energy, or we need to make sure we don't go too high in terms of active thyroid hormone. So there's a number of reasons why we have T3, reverse T3 in the body. Again, I don't think anywhere in the UK actually even test this. The only thing we don't want to see is we don't want to see it super, super high. But if anywhere does test it, or if you can get it tested and you are in another country, do get it tested, as it's great to be able to see what is going on internally. Is our body under a high level of stress? Like, we can still have high T3, high T4, low TSH, but then have extremely high reverse T3 as well. That could then should be signs that there is some issues in terms of something going on downstream with the signaling that's going on that we obviously can't see without that. So if you can get it tested, get it tested. I don't think anywhere in the UK does test it, so unfortunately we can't get it done here. But again, I'm going to cover in part 2 how we can kind of bypass all the blood tests and all that stuff with this stuff, and we can really see how healthy our metabolism and we are as metabolically flexible, healthy, functional individuals. So yeah, that is that. Where am I? Hypothyroidism. I'm only going to talk about in solitude Hashimoto's here, as obviously I've given my piece on hypothyroidism in general. Is it curable? Yes. Do most people want to cure it? Probably not, because they like being victim to the medical field, and they put their trust in them, even though 2020 maybe says that we shouldn't. But anyway, yeah. So what is Hashimoto's? It is basically just an autoimmune disease. Unfortunately, it's one of those horrible things where the immune system attacks somewhere. Sometimes it's our liver, sometimes it's our gut, sometimes it's our thyroid, sometimes it's our bowels. We can really get an autoimmune disease anywhere. And it usually does, like I said, this usually does come from a place where the body is, or we are under stress. Like a lot of autoimmune diseases actually are sparked from normally just high stress environments, in terms of if our environment is not healthy, in terms of the environment in our head, the environment that we live in, the stress that we live day to day, the lifestyle choices that we make. So again, I'm not saying that they are they potentially preventable? Possibly, but again, we all live life, and we all live life how we want to on our terms. So yeah, if you do get an autoimmune disease, hopefully it's a kick in the, it's a kick up the arse to say, right, I need to really sort my shit out, and I need to try and make sure that I don't get 7 or 8 autoimmune diseases, because then you really are struggling with an immune system that is potentially going to kill you, and it will, it really will. So yeah, that is that. In terms of how hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's disease, is diagnosed, it is usually diagnosed by high TSH, low T3, low T4, and then these were the other antibodies. That was it, TGAB. These are the antibodies that do get tested. So what we will see, and I'll kind of go in a little bit more detail on them slightly later, but we can actually have high TSH, low T3, low T4, but then have no presence of antibodies. If that is the case, we don't have Hashimoto's, we just have some level of subclinical hypothyroidism, and we have a fucking shit lifestyle that we need to fix. If we have high levels of TPOAB or TGAB, and we have all the other symptoms, then we probably have some autoimmune disease going on, or kind of prospering, trying to attack the thyroid gland. So hopefully, if we can catch it early enough, we can confirm, or we can kind of get it out. If we can't, then we're probably likely going to end up with Hashimoto's disease. If that does happen, we will likely have to, well, not likely, we will have to be on T4 medication for the rest of our life, which again, in the UK, fucking stupid. Like I've said, just because we have T4 being put in doesn't mean that we're going to have decent levels of T3 being produced. So for example, I have another, again, I'm not going to mention the name, but he won't mind me mentioning, but I had a client this year. He lost 25 kilos. He had hypothyroidism, so he's now on thyroxine to manage his thyroid that doesn't really work. But we were getting bloods done, and consistently his levels were coming back with perfectly fine T4 levels, but really high TSH levels as well, off the charts high. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we're having some feedback loop somewhere, that we've not actually got enough thyroid hormone being used in our body. So although T4 levels were high, because there's no T3 levels tested, we didn't know, or we don't know where his T3 levels are at. We could assume that, okay, if T4 is high, but TSH is also extremely high, we've probably not got enough T3 or active T3 in the body, and there's probably a downstream effect of either T3 is just not being converted, or T4 is being converted to reverse T3, which is then again not causing enough T3 in the body regardless. So once you kind of understand this stuff, guys, as well, you can, I want to try and help you guys, whether you want to coach yourself or just to be be able to understand your own bloods in the future. But it's really about just getting an understanding of, okay, when we understand what the process is and what the downstream effects are, we can really break down, okay, what is it that's going on and what do we actually need to do to kind of make sure that we're seeing the full picture without necessarily seeing the full picture. But however, yeah, like I said, we can have sufficient levels of T4 in the body, not have any levels of T3 present in the body as well, though. So just because we have, 150 micrograms of T4 being taken every single day doesn't necessarily mean that our thyroid or our metabolism in general is in a good spot. If our body is in a highly stressed state, which it probably is if we're hypothyroid, it's probably not going to do a great job at converting T4 to T3. Remember, 80% of our thyroid, of our T3, is converted in bodily tissues. So if our body is under stress, what's the last thing it does? Hormone production and all that stuff, reproduction and hormone production in general, is one of the things that takes a back burner, because stress and survival is going to take precedence over making sure that we can produce things optimally. So that is that. So having high levels of T4 doesn't necessarily mean that we have a healthy metabolism. We really need to look at the deep picture. We really need to get an understanding of what is going on internally to really get an understanding of what we need to do to make things better. I think this is the last page. Yeah, so last one, Graves' disease, really, really, really short. So this is the opposite to hypothyroidism. This is hyperthyroidism. This is horrific. I've never actually, thankfully, had to work with anyone that does have this, but I do have a friend, his girlfriend does have it, and she's been suffering with it for about 18 months, and it's horrendous. So touch wood, none of you guys ever have to suffer with this, because it really is horrific. Again, this is why taking care of our body and our lifestyle is so important, to make sure that we don't ever have autoimmune diseases occur. And again, similarly, this is tested by T3, T4, TSH, and then a different antibody of TSI. I don't actually know too much about this, because I don't think the percentage of people that actually do have it is very high at all. If you know anyone that does have it and has currently got it, or is currently going through something like this, please get me in contact with them, because I would love to either help them with their experience or to kind of just get a deeper understanding in terms of what they're experiencing, so that if one of you guys does ever end up getting it, I'm fully equipped to be able to help you through and know what to do to manage the symptoms and support you more than your GPs will, because unfortunately they don't support us that well, because they're so overrun with other stuff. Anyway, that's part 1 done. Hope you all enjoyed. Hopefully you've taken away some value. I'll see you all soon. Peace.